Toastmasters and welcome guests. When I was about 5, my mother took my sisters and me on an exciting field trip. We didn't get to go out much because Mom had a lot of kids. I was the oldest, and it was very difficult to get all the way from the south side to any place interesting. But she had decided that she wanted to raise cultured children. She told us she was taking us to the Art Institute, and we'd see beautiful paintings and beautiful statues. And of course, we would behave ourselves like ladies. We got to the museum, we walked in, my sister Bridget and I, Bridget was second, we're looking around and it was just amazing. The ceilings were so high and there were lots of people there, and as soon as we came in we saw this long staircase going up and there were beautiful marble floors. About a second later we heard as my sister Maura slid across the marble floors in her socks because she had taken off her shoes. My mother turned around with a look of, "I will kill you in a few minutes," and went over and grabbed her and pulled her back and told her to put on her shoes right now and behave herself. While she was doing this, Bridget and I were standing next to the staircase, and I had my hand on a statue that was there. I hadn't even noticed it. And the statue was made of marble. It was so cool and smooth. I started petting it. My mother had finished putting on Maura's shoes and turned around and saw me and said, "No, you don't touch the artwork!" This was a disaster. I was always the good girl. And here I was just as bad as my worthless sister Maura. I looked up and I saw it was a statue of a naked man, which I'm sure made it all the worse for Mom. She kind of hustled us out and we went through the museum. But sadly, I had already fallen in love with touching museum stuff. I don't remember how that day ended, but about 15 years later, I was in college. I was in Rome. I went to a museum in Rome, or not a museum, excuse me, a church, where Michelangelo's statue of Moses sat in the corner. Moses with the horns, because there had been a bad translation and somebody had written down horns instead of wisdom, which people had followed, so Michelangelo had sculpted him with these stupid horns that nobody could figure out. It was there, something Michelangelo had carved there, 2 inches from my hand. Right in front of it, you could put money in a little container, light yourself a candle, put money in the container, lit myself a candle, and just touched something that Michelangelo had touched. It was one of the most thrilling moments of my life, to touch something the master had touched. About 10 years later, I took my godson to London on a special trip for his 10th birthday for my nieces and nephews and godsons. We celebrated with a special trip, and he was the first. We went to London, we went to the National Gallery, and there was the Rosetta Stone. The stone that had been found in the late 1700s and in the early 1800s. Jean-Pierre Champollion had figured out how to read hieroglyphics. This is perhaps the most valuable stone in the world. It was right there. There's nothing around it. It was a couple thousand years old, really valuable, amazing, a piece of history. I looked around, no guards. And I said, "Jeffrey, do you know what this is?" No. I explained to him about people that had not been able to read what hieroglyphics meant. Nobody knew what this stuff meant. And then this stone was found, and it was written in 3 languages: hieroglyphics, Greek, and Demotic, which was a common language, shorthand. And because of that, a French scholar had been able to figure out what it was. I said, "Would you like to touch history?" And he looked at me and said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You can touch something that's 2,000 years old and you can share in this experience." And he said, "Is that allowed?" And I said, "Mm." So we both touched history. Later we went to the Louvre in Paris. We took the Channel train and went to the Louvre. And while we were there, what do we see but my old pal Michelangelo and his captive slaves. About a half dozen unfinished statues that were all in a gallery, each one of them slightly less finished than the other, but all of them quite homoerotic. And we were looking at it, and I said, you know, Michelangelo carved these. He touched these. One of the greatest sculptors who ever lived touched these. And there's nothing to stop us from touching greatness again. So there's a kind of a snoozy security guard in the corner, and I just backed up a little and suggested that Jeffrey touch history, and he did. And then I had a little touch of history myself. These are things that it's kind of bad behavior. Started with my sister Moore's bad behavior, continues, but it's something that I've never forgotten. These are the things that make these experiences wonderful for me. It's not, for most people, going to a museum is just looking at things. For me, it was actually touching history, touching something that greatness had touched. I have since been back to the London Gallery. They cleaned up the Rosetta Stone, and it's a totally different color now. It was kind of black when I was there, and now it's like a pinkish gray, and it has a big plastic box around it, so no touching. Went to the Louvre a couple of years ago. Yeah, ropes all around those captive slaves. It's kind of sad when somebody ruins it for everybody else, but it's kind of nice when you got in before it was too late.